Through the hot red tides of sin.
This is Faith Blind
Council.
Everything is within.
You create the light.
We Are One.
That's it.
So I was at the local sandwich shop.
Subway. You were at Subway.
Yeah, I think that's what they call it, a Subway. But it's not. There's not like a train that goes through it,
Right, no.
except for a train of grain.
Stop.
There's sandwiches.
Yeah.
I had a sandwich there, and the gal working behind the counter was talking about her terrible case of senioritis, and I couldn't help myself. And I was just like, "That's what your life is from now on."
Oh, yeah.
It's just cycles of boredom.
How old are you? You're still in your 20s? Oh, it gets better.
It
Does
just
not get better.
There's just never. That's all it is. And then she was like, "Oh, but I'm going to college next year," and I was like,
Oh!
I was like, it's the exact same, except you have to walk more.
Yeah.
But there's drugs at least. And then she was like, "But I'm going to a Christian college," and I was like, "Oh boy, you are getting double scammed." And that's what this episode is about. The double scam.
Okay.
Left hand versus right hand
yeah.
path. This is the Faith Blind Council, by the way. I probably should have opened with that.
Yeah, well.
I am Frauder Dreadnought.
Frauder Yarmarud.
And Cesar Cologne.
She's here!
Yay!
Hello.
We did it. We're alive. So today we're going to be talking about left hand and right hand path in occult tradition. We're going to kind of, to be like, as a preface, this is a very general overview of each philosophy as opposed to an in-depth kind of... What the fuck are you going on about, Kat?
My cat's sad because no one's paying attention to
I
her.
know,
and
she's
so
bringing the toy.
crying.
She's going to drown the toy.
Yeah, she brings the toy because she's sad because no one's paying attention to her. And so she cries and carries around a toy like a kitten.
Anyhow,
Yeah.
this is going to be a very, quick overview of both philosophies. It's not necessarily going to be super in-depth on one or the other.
No, because I'm going to be real honest. I was, rehashing, reading from some other books and just doing shit like that, and I got distracted, so...
Well, and it's also a thing, there are a bunch of books written on both philosophies.
Yep.
And so much more than what we could cover in a, 2.5 hour show.
Yep. Bring in the broad strokes.
So, yeah, that's what we're going to do today. We're also going to kind of talk about a few different, not necessarily so most of what we're going to talk about will be as it applies to, Western esotericism. But there are some other concepts of left hand and right hand work in other, systems.
Yeah, it actually stems from Eastern traditions.
Yeah. But I guess the way that I would put it is just because of what our collective experience is, we're Western occultists. We live in America.
Right, but
So-
I myself have done plenty of work in Eastern traditions, though.
But I haven't. So I don't want
So
to say...
don't fucking claim that we are all this when I'm over here no, I'm not.
Okay, but I mean, do you live there, though?
Don't even. Don't start with me.
I'm just saying. You've done other stuff, sure, but you are,
Right.
your overall
Yeah,
experience.
no, I get you.
Everything that we're going to say is colored by that.
Yeah.
So let's kind of just get right into it. A lot of what we're going to, the resources that we're going to be drawing on primarily for Left Hand Path is going to be Lords of the Left Hand Path.
Yep, by Stephen Flowers. I think that's his name.
Which is a pretty good book.
Oh, no, it's fantastic. Stephen E. Flowers, Ph.D., Lords of the Left Hand Path, highly suggested.
For Right Hand Path, the most of what I'm going to be drawing from is the sacred work of a Bremel and the Mage, not having done it, just having read it.
Yeah.
And also, in my mind, the Lemegation's Lesser Key of Solomon, not so much of what you're trying to do, but the ways that you're supposed to go about it.
Okay. Yeah, getting into that's where, especially from what Flowers had talked about, there's a gray line when it comes to left versus right.
And that's,
path. So
I think that's a thing
we'll
with
talk about it, but
with chaos magic specifically, those lines aren't definite.
Oh no.
And I don't think they ever really have been.
No.
It's less about like, this is where the left hand starts and the right hand stops. It's more about, in my mind, because it's a philosophical approach, it's how do you look at doing magic?
Well, right, and it's kind of like with the whole different kinds of magic when people hear about it, like black magic versus white magic. I think it was Peter Carroll, I think, who said in his book Cyber Magic that with a white magician you can confuse them for weeks just by putting a pentagram up on their door. With a black magician, they'll never get anything done because they're too worried about which breed of cat to sacrifice. But with a gray magician, they'll steal your girlfriend and and then thank you later for doing it. Or they will steal your girlfriend and you will thank them later for doing it.
That's that makes all the sense in the
I know.
world.
It's just my point being that with a white magician, they're always focused on good, and because of that, evil is always creeping in, versus a black magician tends to be more like conception of always being everything is ceremonial and it has to be done the perfect way, whereas in reality lines are blurred and there's really no definitive way to put anything into a box.
That's fair. I've been reading Condensed Chaos again lately.
Yeah. And one thing,
and that's a thing I want to do an episode on.
Yeah,
maybe an esotopical at some point, talking about the ideas of Phil Hine.
Because we've talked about how influential Carroll is and everything, but we also really wanted to, both Dreadnought and I suggest breed Phil Hine do that.
Yeah, Phil Hine is much more accessible.
Yeah.
It's not this weird draconian, like...
Or just filled with equations like Liber Chaos is.
Anyhow, I've been reading through that again, and there's this idea that he brings up towards in I think chapter 2 about the 19th century dichotomy of, like, basically before that point, magic was cloistered away by the rich. Mm-hmm. And you had to have all of these resources and all of this time basically to do it. And there was a separation of high magic versus low magic, which would be high magic was like getting in touch and transcending and becoming one with the Godhead, which is right-hand path magic. Yeah. And then there was low magic or sorcery, which was just about creating tangible results, which isn't necessarily a left-hand path thing, but it's a point that you can look at and see where there's this dualistic nature of, like, people have always found a way to categorize things.
Well, yeah, that's our nature. We have labels for fucking everything.
Mm-hmm. And that's, in my mind, really the crux of right-hand path magic versus left-hand path magic.
And a big reason that we wanted to do this episode was because there's, at least me personally, there's always a misconception that people hear right-hand path magic and they just assume, oh, right-hand path, that's ritual magic. And then left-hand path, that's evil.
Yeah. Which is not at all what it's about. So let's go ahead and just go, like, right for it. And we'll start off with definitions of each philosophy, I guess.
Well, first, before we do that, I'm curious. Satyr Cologne, how do you perceive left-hand path versus right-hand path magic, knowing what you know right now?
Well, I probably made the huge mistake of deciding to just listen to some various YouTube videos on the subject. And I feels like people tend to define them very differently depending on how they want to use the term so that they can define themselves in some way. So left-hand path, from what I could discern, seems to be working outside of a particular structure of magic. Seems more individualistic and like not beholden to particular rules and such. I know you've talked to me before about it's, a search for becoming your own god in some way, rather than right-hand path, which is some people define it like that's good, but it seems like people more define it as it's just they follow certain rules, they believe in karma. It seems to be associated a lot with Wiccan things, especially. That's kind of what I've gathered so far.
Okay. No, that's fair.
It's not really too far off. So both paths are about transcending, right? Right-hand path is about transcending in order to become one with God. So you follow a bunch of rules.
Which, the word God here, it should be used like not necessarily believe in a deity or a particular pantheon. God, you could substitute for the word nature. So this could also mean right-hand path would be becoming as attuned with nature as possible, or a personal union with the form of the universe.
Yeah. So I usually, that's what I define as God. But it's about becoming one with God. You follow a bunch of rules, you do a bunch of things, you live your life in a certain way so that you can transcend and become one with that nature. Whereas
it seemed to me like it was more associated with more formal religions and formal study. Is that
those things tend to incorporate more right-hand path philosophy. They're not necessarily the same thing.
okay?
But like Christianity, for example, is very much in the right-hand path school because there is a God that you are attaining understanding of.
Hell, I would have used Judaism as a perfect example for that, with their use of the Sephiroth and
Mystic Judaism. The Kabbalah is like essential right-hand path magic.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, or the building blocks for it, I should say.
Oh no! Like once you move up the tree on the Sephiroth, the tree of life, like that, the entire purpose of that is you start at the bottom and then you move up each node so that way you get to the crown Keter, in which once you achieve Keter, then you achieve perfect union with God and the creation of the universe. So yeah, that's absolutely right-hand path. Need to be there with the Godhead.
But yes, most organized, especially Western religion, is founded on right-hand path philosophy, where there is a higher power above us that we are trying to attain union with. Whereas left-hand path is also about transcending, but it is about transcending the structure. It's about becoming your own God. It's about eschewing. Is that how you pronounce it? Yeah, it's about doing away with the rules and the aspect or the idea of a God that you could even want to become one with, and instead becoming your own.
Yeah, or just subverting the order of the universe, or going against the natural flow of the universe.
That, in my mind, is a very specific type of left-hand path philosophy.
Yeah, does that presuppose that they're having to believe there is an order that you're fighting against? Can you be like, there isn't really any order, and so would going left-hand path mean that you are admitting that there is an order, I'm deciding to go against it?
It could very well. It could also be defined as going with the order of the universe. You take whatever happens to you, and that's going to just be it. However, following left-hand path and going against the order of the universe is exerting your will and doing no, I'm going to be myself and do what I want to do, and not become slave to how the universe wants me to move and how God wants me to behave or whatever. It's like you had said, it's much more individualistic.
Yeah, I remember reading something about some people on the right-hand path, even at would say, it seems weird to me that anybody who's doing magic would say this, but I consider any sort of magic that really changes reality in any way would be considered more left hand because it's against the will of how things go.
Yeah, that's more.
But that seems really extreme. It seems like a lot of right-handers don't necessarily think that.
In my mind, when you get to that level of argument, you're now talking about the mystic versus the magician.
Gotcha.
Right, and it's kind of like the difference even within Christianity versus like someone you would pull off the street, like any of my parents, to like most Protestants or Christians, versus talking to a Calvinist, we've already been decided. Everyone who God wants to go to hell is going to hell. Like, there's no choice in the matter. Like, It's already been decided. But then, versus most Christians who are like, no, you can be saved by grace, and you have free will, and you can do whatever. Like, there's a basically ultra-Orthodox with Calvinism, just like there's an ultra-Orthodox with right-hand path that would go, like, I'm not going to do anything that is against the will of the universe. And those tend to be more kind of ascetics or monks or separated from society.
Yeah, they're disengaging, disassociating from,
And it goes back to...
what's it called? Becoming unattached.
Disentangling?
Or something like that. Yeah.
That works.
Non-attachment. There we go. Nailed it.
Boom.
So basically, when you're looking at systems of magic, as opposed to beliefs, in my mind, most systems incorporate both philosophies in kind of a mishmash manner. And the way that I would say that is if you look at like traditional Goetic magic.
Yeah.
It is, Yara, you have said on multiple occasions to me that you consider it left-hand path work.
Yes. Because
you are summoning you're evoking these lower spirits, these demons, to basically do things for you. You are exerting your will upon upon an outside system.
My point being it's directed by one's will.
And I see the validity in that.
Mm-hmm.
In my mind, depending on how you do the work, if you go by the Lesser Key of Solomon, it is approached from a right-hand path point of view. You're imposing your will, but you're not using your power to do it. You are threatening with the power of God that you have to be aligned with in order for the magic to work.
But then my argument is it's the whole means to an end thing. Like, I would still consider it left-hand path if you were to be summoning angels to do your bidding and asking them for questions to go and kill demons in order to obtain your answers. You're still exerting your will by what you want. Like, because you could follow the whole becoming one with the union of the universe, and if it's the universe or God's will, in order for you to obtain that information, you would just get it naturally without exerting your will in order to obtain it through that methodology.
Yeah, the point that I'm making with that distinction is that you can look at this one system of magic and interpret it however you want.
Right.
And there aren't necessarily wrong ways of interpreting it if you're looking at it from the point of view of chaos magic, which we are. Right. It's about your experience.
Right. It's just like I don't see right-hand path versus left-hand path as purely about ascension either, like, or transcending anything, because it could easily just be like, you know, doing magic so that way, like, it to help become closer to the way of the universe versus doing things against it and bending it to your will. It doesn't necessarily have to be about transcending and becoming your own God or becoming one with God. It could just as easily be like, you know, I'm doing it in a certain way because, like, I want this one thing versus I'm doing it in a certain way with the goal that I am more attuned with everything around me.
That's fair. I guess when I was saying that at the beginning, I was talking in kind of like broad generality.
Right.
Specifically, what you're saying, I agree with the fact that, or with the idea, I should say, that you can kind of take these views and shrink them down.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like putting anything under a microscope. The more you shrink that down, the more kind of little bits are going to stand out and not necessarily conform in any way.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to the point that you were making, Cologne, about doing any magic being like to alter nature or your path or whatever, not being right hand magic. I think that taking any interest in the occult at all and actually practicing anything occult inherently is left hand.
Even if you're purely practicing mysticism for the purpose of becoming one.
I differentiate occultism and mysticism.
Okay.
They're separate to me. Mysticism is about understanding your place.
Okay.
Occultism is about imposing your will.
Okay. I guess I just don't see it, because for me, occultism is just learning the unknown.
I get...
So, like, in that case, you would see that even, like, mysticism, as he defines it, is still left-hand path, because you're outside the...
It can be. You could follow, like, right-hand path mysticism, where you are finding, like, the structure of the universe and how to become closer to it. So, like, through steps like the Kabbalah or through sacred geometry or something like that, understanding how the universe is built so that way you can become closer to it. But at the same time, you could practice mysticism where the reverse of the Sephiroth, where you have the Qliphoth, and you understand the structure of how to destroy that universe.
True. I guess for me, we'll get rid of all the dumb terminology.
Okay.
If you are seeking to understand your place,
yeah,
that's not necessarily left-handed path. You're seeking and you're understanding and you're learning. The second you start applying any of that knowledge, in my mind, you are now practicing magic, which is inherently left-hand path, because you are now seeking to inherently subvert where you naturally would be otherwise.
Right.
I don't know if that makes sense. It makes sense in my head.
I mean, but you get, like...
It's the difference between, like, you can... If you read and understand and take a gun safety course and learn how to use a gun...
Yeah.
That's very different than actually going out and firing a gun.
Right. No, I kind of see what you're saying, but you could still apply it so that, like, okay, the different structures of the Sephiroth, for example, and understanding the different nodes of them, it's in following the right hand path and getting closer to Keter, the crown, you can apply those different nodes to your life as well, because they each have different meaning. So, like, the foundation being in there and understanding your foundation, and then moving up to a different node and, like, getting up to Da'ath of knowledge, and you still apply those things in your path to union. Like, you still, because I think it was the commentary on the Sefer Yetzirah, where it had, which Sefer Yetzirah is the Jewish book of creation, where by understanding what these nodes are, that way you are able to understand the different facets and aspects of God, and by using those and understanding the true purpose of those facets and of those nodes and applying them to your life, you become closer to the union of your union with the universe, because you understand that by applying those, it is bringing you closer to the perfection that should be.
Okay, that's fair. I guess you're looking at things purely still like as archetypes of, like, right hand path. You're using the tree of life. Left hand path, you'd then be looking at, like, Qliphoth or something.
Yeah.
That's fair. I guess to me it doesn't really make a difference.
Okay.
It's about how you apply it.
Right.
if I take moving up the tree purely as a way to understand these concepts and be able to apply them to life, and that's like how they're intended to be used to get closer to God, that's fine. That's, right hand path. If I'm using them then as a way to subvert, like, I'm going to use my understanding of knowledge to, like, fuck this guy and get a better job.
Oh, yeah,
whatever.
That's left-hand path. And then right there, the operative word in what you had just used was subversion.
Yeah.
Because you are going against that nature.
I guess it would be the definition then to, you are using it for a purpose other than intended.
Yeah.
Kind of. It's like robo-tripping. Left-hand path is basically robo-tripping. I'm with it.
Yeah, well, and it's like, that's... So you could also say it as right-hand path, where the primary mover, the primary motivator is nature, God, whatever. Whereas left-hand path, the primary mover, motivator, and the one who decides the action and what to do, and how to apply it, and why, and when, and where, would be the will, the self, the individual. You are the one who decides, which is what makes you your own God, versus right-hand, where it's, I'm being moved by God and wanting to become one with that.
I feel like there are a lot more left-hand path practitioners than even realize that that's what they're doing.
Oh yeah, yeah, and a very, very, very big reason for that is because it's left-hand path is demonization, and because for the longest time, individuality has been looked down upon, because it's not. You are part of a community. You need to be part of the community. You need to help the community, which if you look at from a societal standpoint, you need to help the greater good. You need to become one with the greater good. You need to help the state. You need to help your community. You need to help your family. You need to become one with and have union with the status quo.
You need to help your pack.
Yeah. Versus you're looking out for your individual self.
Mm-hmm.
That's left hand. That's bad. Why are you doing that? You've got all this other stuff. You need to be part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't stop thinking about things you want. You need to help the bigger picture. And so because of that demonization, along the fact that we get the word sinister from the Latin meaning left-handed, that it's used by some practitioners within left-hand path. It's the sinister path.
Well, it's also used in medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Like your left eye is your ocular sinestris.
Yes, sinestris.
Something like that. It's
it is Latin.
Yeah, and you're like anything on your left-handed side is sinestris, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that just carries over.
Yeah, and it's from that Latin root of left hand that we get the word sinister, and sinister is applied to evil. And what, according to the church, and the church had a stronghold on European culture and Western culture for 1,000 years.
Had past tense.
Yeah,
totally still not happening.
Right. But with that, if they say something is sinister, something is evil, then it is, and it gets shunned. And that individuality is the same way. That's why how I had mentioned on, I think it was the last Esotopical, how a lot of medieval grimoires and medieval works were written anonymously because...
Yeah, it was when we were talking about Long Lost Friend. How that book kind of breaks from that status quo where Homan just put his name on it.
Yeah. And so that individuality, that pride in oneself was looked down upon. That's why of the 7 deadly sins, pride is the worst.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was pride that had Lucifer thrown out of heaven. So, dumb. Yeah, but it's that's why left-hand path is demonized. And that's why, like you had said, so many people practice it but don't recognize that they do. Because it has this, view that everything you were doing left hand is bad. So, yeah, it's No, you're totally doing left-hand magic if you're doing it for yourself. That's fine. Whatever. Understand that there's two sides to every coin, man.
And it's also a thing where people get caught up in these like philosophical arguments about it, which I say that totally understanding that that's literally what we're doing for the next 2 hours. But understand that all of this is just philosophy.
Yeah.
Like, it's all theory and it's great, but you're still doing things. Like, you do things, like, individually that are from both.
Yeah.
And it's just like anything else. Like, I can talk about, like, being a communist, but I still go to work every day.
Yeah.
Like, I still do things to provide for myself and my loved ones. Like,
right. Yeah, I know. I was just thinking that, like, yeah, you could totally subvert the societal whatever, but you know what? You're still spending money at stores. You're still, you're not a social pariah that lives out in the woods and, decides to attack every human that you see. You're listening to this right now, so that means you're probably part of society in some way.
yeah, it's the bomb the music industry line about oh god, I forget what song it's in, but he basically the line is every Fugazi record has a catalog number and a price tag.
Yeah,
like you still exist in a system, rents still due.
Yeah,
you still need to take care of yourself.
Right. I mean, it's not a bad idea to subvert that system. If you have a problem with the system, we're not saying don't do what you can to change it. It's just like you're still part of a system, and you're going to be part of a system. And that's where we get back to what we had said earlier, where it's more of a gray line.
Yeah. So another really popular example of right hand path magic would be the sacred work of a Bremel and the Mage.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say, I mean like right hand methodology.
Yeah.
Like the work of a Bremel and the Mage is, it takes anywhere from 6 to 18 months, depending on which
translation you read.
And it's all about, you have to do all of these different, like, you have to draw all of these sigils and do all of this work and it's all about purification.
Yeah,
it's all about abstaining. It's all about
right,
cutting away the earthly vices so that you can contact your holy guardian angel.
Yeah, you have to stick to a certain diet. You've got to wake up at certain times.
And like you say all of these prayers.
It's a whole fucking thing.
Yeah, you abstain from any kind of like worldly pleasure, basically. Yeah, like no jacking off, no wearing skirts. I don't know what the rules are, but like
no polyester.
There's a lot of like it basically it calls for you to cut yourself off from society completely,
right,
for at least 3 months,
right,
because the whole thing works in cycles. There are basically 3 cycles that you do, and you start with cycle 1 and you do it anywhere from 2 to 6 months depending on the translation that you're looking at. And then you move to cycle 2, which incorporates all of cycle 1, and then you add more shit to it. And you do all of that for the next one, and then you do the third one. And on the third one, you don't talk to anybody. You don't leave your house. You don't fucking
Doesn't it even say that you can't, like, speak out loud?
Yeah, for the third cycle, I think it's the second or third cycle, you cannot speak unless it's saying the prayers.
Yeah.
That's the only thing you're allowed to say out loud. And you do this in order to contact your higher God form, basically, and gain understanding. That is like, if you were to put right hand path magic into one archetype, that's it.
Yeah.
It's all of these rules that you're doing so that you can attain oneness with something higher than yourself.
Right.
Whereas, like, what would you consider if you could put left hand path magic into one archetypal, like, system? First of all, do you think there is one?
No.
Okay, well then let's just stop that right there.
Well, no, it's they're okay. So the reason I don't think that there's one archetypal system is because it's so varied. So, like, okay, so with my definition of just looking out for the will, looking out for yourself, and going against the established system, First of all, there's the whole going against the established system of the dominant religion. So you have things like the Temple of Set or the Church of Satan or whatever, and that's patently going against whatever, and that's left-hand path. That could be the common like overview of what, or at least like what most people see it as. But there's also, like, as I had said, working anything of your will towards something. So, like, even if you're doing fucking, like, I'm doing a spell so that I get an extra $20 to go to the movies this weekend, that's still left-hand path because it's still directed by your will. And the reason why I say that I don't believe that there is an archetype is the whole left-hand path versus right-hand path stems from the Vedic texts in Hinduism, where it was believed that the flow of the universe entered your right side and passed out through your left side. And so left-hand path was going against that, and it took an active part of will to go against the flow of the universe, and so you were exerting the power of your left hand. And one of the things that both the Vedic texts teach, and so with that comes Hinduism or Buddhism, is that the natural flow of the universe is Samsara, which is the state of death and rebirth. And so the natural state of the universe is this wheel and continuation of death and rebirth. However, the ultimate goal of most Hindus and Buddhists is Shakti, which is to break from that.
To get out of the wheel.
And getting out of the wheel is left-handed path.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that there's one particular archetype for it, because these two very popular religions are founded upon breaking this rule of the order of the universe. And when you think left-hand path, magic, you don't think Hindu or Buddhist, but those two philosophies are very much grounded in subverting the natural flow of the universe by breaking out of the natural order.
I mean, I would have accepted Zen Buddhism for that answer, because that's like the whole point of it is understand. Like, you understand the connections of the universe in order to then break them. Like,
right,
and that's the closest you come to enlightenment.
Yeah, and enlightenment. What the Buddha did, what Siddhartha Gautama did, was break from the natural flow of the cycle of death and rebirth by achieving enlightenment.
Yeah.
That's what he did. And so that was left-hand path. Like the flow is constantly die, come back, and everyone does it, and we just keep going in this circle, but he shot out of the circle. And so that was, by doing so, that's taking the power of one's will in order to break from the order of the universe.
Okay. I feel like part of it is because left-hand path philosophy lends itself so much to individuality that it makes it hard to nail down one practice, right? Because you can look at something like the Temple of Set,
right?
Where the Temple of Set is this, like, super rigid satanic order of, like, you have to do all of this magic, blah, 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 this way in order to subvert, blah, 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 blah. But by making everybody conform to one rule set, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah, it seems a little antithetical to the point.
Well, first of all, the Temple of Set are a bunch of douchebags. Like, they're fucking nerds. Like, they're just fucking, like, they take Satanism, take out all the fun shit, and then just put in, like, literally all they're doing is taking, like, they take all of the fucking weird ceremonial magic from the Book of Mormon and make it grimdark edgelord shit, and take out all of the fun, like, soaking and butt fucking and shit, and now you have the Temple of Set.
Well,
it's boring nerd. They're boring nerds!
Well, I mean, it's no better than the fucking Church of Satan, which is just Ayn Rand with rituals.
God.
So,
Ugh. God, what? This is white people have ruined Satanism so goddamn much. They took all the fun shit out.
Yeah.
Boring. Ugh.
Right, but no, like there's certain things with like following along traditional Satanism or going with Satanism and following the Qliphoth and things like that I'm currently working in it. Like, to be truth be told, I'm working with Qliphotic magic. I'm working like purely traditional left-hand path, whatever.
But that's again kind of a hyper specific, like, so there's a bunch of there are different left-hand path magic is kind of like metal. There's all these different little sub things of it.
Right,
like,
right, yeah.
And like one of the ones, the one that you're working with right now is very much like anti-cosmic, like,
Yeah.
destroying the order that is the universe we know.
Yeah.
Like, that is a very specific kind of tributary of left-hand path magic.
Right, because according to Kabbalah and all of this, when God had created the universe, he took it out of Ein Sof, which is chaos or non-existence. And so the purpose of a lot of, or some satanic sects, like
satanic sex that nobody gets to have anymore because it's white nerds.
but what a lot of satanic sects are doing is like subverting the state, subverting the god, and getting rid of the demiurge, or like going against what the demiurge wants. With what I'm doing, it's anti-cosmic and it's against everything he created, because we want to go back to the chaos. I did not ask to be ripped from the fucking void. Put me back.
Yeah, here you are. Rent's due on the 1st.
Fuck. I am doing this. I am invoking the Qliphoth, and I am tearing apart the demiurge because I'm tired of paying rent.
Yeah, but do you got your rent, though?
Fuck you.
I'm just saying.
You
like,
capitalist pig.
You're not wrong. I ate so much food today.
Dude, I ate so many hot dogs this morning.
It was, oh my God. It was amazing. But no, so like you have kind of, there are a bunch of different, there was a left-hand path thing that I did for a little while, and I still do some things from it. I kind of took what was useful for me and then moved on.
You know, as we do.
Which was more of Luciferian left-hand path, which is not necessarily, like, Luciferian left-hand path itself isn't about destroying everything. It's
casual.
It's about understanding. It's about understanding the lie.
Yeah.
It's about understanding that the demiurge is a fucking liar.
Oh, we already know that. Tear it down!
And so by doing that, it's more about understanding a different way to work within that system, to subvert it.
Yeah.
Specifically what I was working with was Luciferian Goetia.
Mm-hmm.
And understanding that, like, this whole, like, so going back to what we were talking about, like, a half hour ago with, using the lemegations and the, like, oh, thou wicked and conniving trickster in the name of God and blah, blah, blah. Fucking, you don't have to do that.
Do I have to speak to your manager?
Yeah, like, you don't have to Karen. You don't have to Karen the fucking Goetia. You can just establish a link with them and talk to them. And it's more, in that vein, it's more about you show these entities your power.
Yeah.
You call to them and you evoke them using your power.
Right.
So it still uses a lot of the same kind of symbolism. Like, you still use the circle, you still use the triangle, but they have different meanings. You subvert that meaning. The circle, instead of it being a thing of protection, is now a thing of focusing your power.
Right.
The triangle, instead of being a prison, is now a gateway. You make the triangle and, like, this is the door, and then you open the triangle and, like, all right, come on in.
Right.
It's about subverting that symbolism. And by doing that, you are basically showing these entities, like, look, I have shit I want to get done, and I have shit I can give you. let's work together.
Well, see, and that's why I had contention about your previous statement with like just following the Key of Solomon as right hand, because if you're doing like angelic work and shit, if it's your will, like let's take it to an extreme. If it is your will to have someone dead, if you were to summon a demon to do it, and going according to what you had just said, like talking to it, treating it as an equal, and showing it your power, and saying like, I want this person dead, and they go do it, how is that any different from an objective, or from an objective viewpoint, than calling upon an angel because someone pissed you off, but you using the excuse, well, they're doing things that are against the nature of the universe?
So for clarification, when I'm talking about how I view it as right hand path, I'm talking about the method by which you summon, purely.
Okay.
Purely the method by which you summon, where you you write out the sacred names of God, and you do this whole incantation, and it's calling upon all of these names of God and the archangels.
Right.
That is right-hand path, because you are using that power. And in order for them to obey your will, they are doing it not because they're afraid of you. Mm-hmm. They're afraid of, okay, this guy is standing with the demiurge.
Right.
And if I don't do what he wants, the demiurge is going to fuck me up.
Yeah.
Not, whereas with Luciferian, you are showing them, like, I have this power, let's work together. Fuck this guy, you're talking to me.
Right. I was just seeing it purely on like honestly, you're still enacting your will.
You are, and that's and in that way, like the means, through the means and ends, it is left-hand path.
Yeah. That was the point I was getting at.
And I should have communicated that better. I do agree that the result is left-hand path. The means are right-hand path.
Gotcha.
The means of, okay, I am in the name of fucking super Jesus. If you don't do what I said, then you don't get any more Funyuns. Like, that is right-hand path.
You fucking
like,
monster.
Like, that's right-hand path ideology. But you're still using it to enact your will. And as one more kind of aside, when you talk about like doing Enochian, right? You summon an angel. You are, in my mind, you're doing this thing of like, okay, you bring this thing down, and you are this guy needs to fuck off to the land of not being alive anymore because he's going against the laws of the universe. You're leaving it up to that entity to still decide.
Right.
That is right-hand path, because you're hoping that it's going to do what it does. You're just pointing an arrow at it.
Right, but you're still
traditional.
Right, okay. Yeah.
In traditional Enochian work, what you do is you summon an angel or an archangel and ask it to do something. Yeah. And then it decides to help you or not. It's very similar in that way specifically. It's very similar to talking to the Loa.
Yeah.
You talk to the Loa and ask them to do things for you, and then they decide whether they're going to help you or not.
Right.
That is right-hand path, because you are aligning yourself with them in the hopes that they will do things for you. You're not telling them to do things. You're not commanding them to do stuff through your will.
Right. Yeah, I can see that.
So that's a good place for us to do our break, I think, for our first break. When we get back, we'll talk a little bit more about different applications of the terms right hand and left hand.
Yeah.
And also kind of dive into a little bit more of, I guess, more. We've talked a lot about right hand path stuff. Like, I want to talk a little bit more about left hand path in action, I guess.
Okay.
So, yeah, we're going to do a break, and we will be right back.
Yay. We would like to give a shout out to the Chaos Coven, or Church of Nothing. The Chaos Coven is a Chicago-based chaos magic working group led by Naya Ein and Ninov. They host workshops every third Saturday of the month from 3 to 5 p.m. at the Occult Bookstore in Chicago, Illinois. Considered by some to be the oldest spirit shop in the world. Each class is pay as thou wilt, with a $15 suggested donation. You can find the Chaos Coven and the Occult Bookstore on Facebook or occultbookstore.com.
All right, so we're going to do some stuff now and talk about things. Welcome to the show where we do stuff and talk about things.
Yes.
There we go. Nailed it. That should be our new intro. It's just that. We'll be like the super, it'll be fine. Don't worry about it. So now I want to kind of get into talking more about technique and less about philosophy. And Cologne, you had actually had a really good point during the break about talking about philosophy.
Well, I probably didn't make it as clear before, but I was trying to think when I was hearing people talk on YouTube, everything. It seems like there is the left-hand or right-hand path is very specific to certain techniques, such as like in the Kabbalah. And that's a very specific technique that you're following it. You are going a right-hand path up the tree or going down. And then there's a whole nother use of the terms left and right-hand path that people tend to use to identify themselves within a dichotomy of the use of magic or some sort of philosophy or their general way of using magic and going about it.
Right, and that kind of reminds me of how I had mentioned earlier, the whole like black magic versus white magic thing, which white magic, okay, healing and like energy work versus black magic, which is like to harm people and like obtain wealth or whatever. I still follow the kind of thing. It's sort of about intent, really. Like, so if you're healing someone, if it's someone who's close to you because you just don't want them sick anymore, that's still following your will. If it were the will of the universe, like we had the Black Plague, we know people just fucking die. Maybe it's just their time. So if it's your will to make them better again, like this is where we kind of get back to the whole gray line thing.
All right. So I think where I would go with that is that whenever you're talking about like something that's philosophical, people are going to stretch it and mold it to make it fit their needs. And that's something that is kind of embraced by chaos.
Yeah, and I think just the terminology of it, like you had mentioned, has its own power to it, which, yeah, of course you're going to find more people using the term left-hand path because, as I said earlier, the whole concept of left-hand path has been kind of demonized, and so people see, oh, left hand, that's bad, that's sinister. But at the same time, people, in order to get their point across, want to seem kind of edgelordy about it, and so instead of calling it the left-hand path, they'll go out and say, no, I follow the sinister path.
Yeah. And you also from that, you get like the douchebags on Reddit who are like, in order to follow the left-hand path, you must spill blood, not your own. Like, shut the fuck up, dude. That's not what it's about.
No.
Like, that's how you end up sounding like a pretentious fuckwad.
Yep.
Just understand what the core is, and it will inform the technique.
Right.
And that's kind of what I want to talk more about now. So one thing that kind of prompted this episode was the last podcast series about right hand, left hand, and chaos magic.
Yeah.
And from that, a lot of it is basically they boil it down to anytime something involves ceremonial magic, that is just right hand path.
Right.
And anytime something involves sex magic, that is left hand path.
Right.
And that's not necessarily true.
No. However, honestly, I do see the connection between sex magic and left-hand path because the use of sex within magic, it also stems from the whole pleasure of it happening, which is entirely focused on the self, versus if you look towards transcending or whatever, it's been used for centuries by multiple cultures. Abstaining from sex is a method of getting closer with the deity because you're restricting that animalistic desire within oneself. So it kind of stems from that.
Yeah, but I would then point to, I believe it's the Zohar.
Yeah.
Which literally the Zohar it translates to the book of pleasure.
What? It does.
Yeah.
No.
And it literally, they talk about the sacred union of a man and a woman and how that is replicating the creation that God did.
Yeah.
Like, so I don't think that...
Right. But my point of, it's using sex as a means to an end, versus the symbolism of it. So using sex as a tool for something versus seeing it as a symbol.
No, they're talking about the actual union, like
right,
actually doing that to understand God. Like you are supposed to actually, like the purpose of sex and the act of doing, like you are meant to find a partner and engage in sex.
Right.
In order to become closer to God. Like I get that. It's just also within I totally understand. What you're talking about is sex magic in the modern like 20th century,
not just
in the sense of like using the Gnostic state you get from orgasm.
No, not just that, because you have things like the Kama Sutra, which was related to the Vedic texts in following the concept of left-hand path, but it was within that culture because it was seen as a natural thing to do. It wasn't demonized like it is in the rite, so it's just like, oh, you're practicing tantric sex, that's just the thing you do. Within Hinduism and Buddhism, since there is that kind of understanding that going against the order of nature isn't inherently wrong, there's nothing wrong with it, so it's accepted. So Kama Sutra and sexual practices are accepted, as opposed to in Western practice, like you had said, with it symbolizing the union with God, like there's a very holy thing to it, and practicing that outside of that one instance would be seen as sacrilege.
Okay, that makes sense. I guess when I think about people like demonizing sex, it to me kind of smacks of like that's the trap, right? Like that is the state or the church or the system or whatever is they've found a way to keep you in place. Right. I do not think that it is truly demonized in actual right-hand path magic. No. I think it's demonized by a system that is masquerading as right-hand path.
Right, but then again, you also get into the historical aspects of possible religious purpose and with social structure. So social structure stretching back to the Indo-Europeans, you have the kings and the bankers and the magicians at the top. Those were the ones that spent their time thinking. The mathematicians, they were the ones who's focused on the mind and focused on transcending and getting closer to God, versus those who were at the bottom, who were the laborers, and it was their job to work. And so you have those within mysticism, like this, like you had spoken about with the union and everything. That's good for the people at the top, who have the time and the money and the energy to actually focus on it, but using it as a form of social control, that's where you would demonize it and go, no, but like we can do it because we're closer to God and we've done all these things, versus the people who are laborers and serfs or slaves, whatever. No, you have this to do. This isn't bad. This is bad. You can't do it. Like it's a form of social control in that aspect too. So it's only those who would have the power within that structure would be able to utilize those techniques.
Yes. I think we're saying the same thing, but in two different ways.
In that, like in right-hand path, there's more like gatekeeping to the use of magic.
Yeah. Well, and it's also, that's a historical thing, but it's also... Yes, it is a right-hand path. Like, you have to go up the steps. There are a bunch of... And that's where I think kind of that misconception of any ceremonial magic is just written off as right-hand. It's not that it is ceremonial, but it's based on the rules. It's based on you have to go through the steps. You have to follow the path that God has laid out before you, and as you follow the path, you will reach understanding in different tiers and levels.
Yeah.
Whereas with left-hand path, and this is something I do want to focus a little more on. I just said moron. Anyways, the idea that like ceremonial magic exists in the left-hand path.
Oh, no, absolutely.
There is a lot of very high ceremony in left-hand path. One of the most popular ones recently would probably be like the Mass of Chaos B.
Yeah.
It's a whole ceremony invoking Baphomet.
Yeah.
Like, that's ceremonial magic. There are specific steps you have to take. There are...
Well, and most people think ceremonial magic, like, what comes to mind is the shit that the OTO and Thelema did back with Crowley, like fucking dressing in robes and carrying around swords and shit and dressing, or having headdresses. So that was... and it's still inherently left-hand path. It's just, there are a lot of fucking steps.
Yeah.
And it's scripted.
I mean, shit, Crowley, for all intents and purposes, is seen as, like, the godfather of left-hand path magic in the 20th century.
The wickedest man alive. Oh, the great beast.
Like, we fucking get it. Like,
Yeah.
But Crowley was super left-hand path.
Yeah.
And it wasn't so much that, like, Crowley was subverting these systems. He was just taking the thing...
And butt-chugging them in the desert.
and making it his.
Yeah.
His whole thing was magic is the art and science of causing change to occur in conformity with the will.
Yep.
Like, that's left-hand path through and through.
Yeah, that's pretty much definition of it, and especially with the will. That's not...
And that's
the art and science of, altering reality in conformance with the order of nature. That's...
Yeah, no, and it's not... Like, it's capital T, capital W, big will.
Yeah.
Like, Big Willie style. Bringing that back. Haven't made that reference in a while.
God damn it.
The point being, there are still a lot of ceremonial aspects.
Yeah.
If you want to go to a complete extreme, you can look at groups like the Temple of Set.
Yeah.
Or if you want to get even douchier about it, like the Order of Nine Angles.
Yeah.
Has a lot of ceremonial magic involved.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's what they do.
Yeah.
Doesn't make them right.
No.
Makes them kind of shitty.
Kind of.
And kind of missing the point entirely, but it's still there.
Right.
There are also things like like the Black Mass.
Which
the one that we did last Easter.
Oh yeah, that was the Black Mass as we did some editings to it, but it was based.
It was like a condensed.
Yeah, it was based on the Black Mass as done by the Church of Satan.
Yeah, but that's ceremony, right? Like the whole thing, and it's about taking those what's the word I'm looking for here? Like symbols.
Yeah.
Or like icons and flipping them.
Yep.
Like you are taking them and making them inherently blasphemous or secular in order to reduce their power.
Right.
So because of that and because of the general purpose and kind of evolution of left-hand path technique, it necessitates there being ceremonial magic.
Mm.
Because in order to subvert the system, you have to become the system.
Yes.
So you see a lot of left-hand path magic mirroring right-hand path.
Yeah.
There are a bunch of rules, but you have to understand the rules in order to break the rules, and that's where we circle back to the whole thing with like
The philosophy.
and the Buddha, and like the idea of understanding the wheel so you can break out of the wheel.
Right. Or like I had said with the structure of like the clip off, you understanding how the universe was built so that you can tear it apart if you're into anti-cosmic shit.
Yeah, it's there's an old saying with engineers, which is you break something so that you can understand how it works so you can fix something.
Yeah.
If you kind of you're flipping that of like you understand the thing as it works so that you can break it.
Okay.
That's kind of that like anti-cosmic kind of anti-establishment left-hand path.
Right.
So there are some technique things that I would like to get into, talking about right-hand path versus left-hand path, and you talk about like understanding ceremony, I guess, because we've obviously just established that it does exist in left-hand path magic.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about how they differ, like a right-hand path ceremony versus a left-hand path ceremony.
Okay. So, a lot of the right-hand path, especially within Western tradition, had to do with abstinence. Because if you're following the will of the Creator, the will of the Creator is to put you at the perfect whatever, the archetype of what a human is. And in order to do so, like, the demiurge had put all of these temptations and whatever in front of you. And so it was your job as a follower, in order to get closer to the demiurge or the Creator or nature or whatever, is to resist any temptation from things that would take away your concentration from your ultimate goal.
It was basically Christ's temptation in the desert.
Yeah.
Like, that was the whole shtick.
Yeah, which is where you have the monastic groups. You have, and this even existed within Hinduism, where the left, well, and in Buddhism, which Buddhism started about the whole follow the middle path thing. So with Buddha, he was, according to the traditional story, he wanted to, obtain enlightenment and shit, and wanted to figure out, like, where does suffering come from. And so for a long time, he just, for most of his life, since he was a prince, he indulged in whatever source of pleasure that he could possibly have, and he found out that that didn't end suffering. And after that, he went and studied the ascetics and just abstained from everything, to the point where he was eating a grain of rice a day and doing nothing but meditating and just abstaining from everything, and realized that nothing came from that either. And so he had taught that the way is the middle path, which is it's not completely indulging in everything, but it's being able to take as much as you need. You only take what is given to you, which is why a lot of Buddhist monks are fed by the communities around them. They don't grow their own food. It's all about temperance and going forward with what you need. But the Hindu societies had the same thing. There are plenty of ascetics who still exist, who will go through all sorts of bodily trials, I suppose is the word for it, that will test their faith and their devotion to the deities, and that's another thing that follows within left or right hand path, is lots of trials and things proving your devotion. So, like, the first thing that comes to mind is this one dude who's had his, I think, right hand held up for like 20-something years. His entire life, or not his entire life, but for the last 20, 30 years, he has had his right hand held above his head, has never put it down. And so because of this, it's suffered extreme atrophy. His fingers have collapsed in on themselves, and he's doing this in devotion to his god.
That's weird.
Yeah, and there are lots of different ways of showing devotion. Within the Christian faith, you have the flagellates, who
Hold on, you have the flatulence?
Yes. There aren't as many of them nowadays. It was more common in the medieval era, but people who would flagellate or beat themselves in order to become closer to God, because they believed that since Christ suffered for them, they should suffer for Christ. But I mean, seriously, since God died for your sins, like, if you don't sin, he died for nothing.
Pretty much.
But
I think the thing that comes to mind for me most is like the story of Job.
yeah, that's a good one.
Like the story of Job is all about testing somebody's faith and testing somebody's devotion, and to what level can you push someone before they break.
Right.
That is like as far as the Bible is concerned, that is like the ultimate test, because Job loses everything.
Yes. And it's all at the hands of Satan.
I mean, if you want to get real technical, it's all at the hands of God, because God does all of it.
Well, right. Satan's just there like,
no, you should do this.
maybe you should just burn down his house.
Satan's the kid, like, so if you think about God playing a game of Sims, Satan...
God's the dude who puts you in a fucking bathtub and takes away the
pool and
swimming pool and takes away the ladder.
Satan's the one that tells him you should do this.
Yeah.
But God did it.
Okay, so Satan's like your little brother who is just doing it while you're playing the game. He's like, you should take away the ladder, man. Oh, no, that's a great idea. Fuck that guy.
Yeah, like, God is the kid with the controller, and Satan is his little brother that you give the controller that's not plugged in.
Yeah.
So that he thinks he's playing too.
Right.
But he's not.
Yeah. So, but yeah, no, I get that. And so within Right Hand Path, you have a lot of acts of devotion. You have a lot of abstinence from things. I mean, you get the fucking 7 deadly sins, which are... won't name them off.
It's too much to look up, and my phone's way over there.
Right, but I mean, there's pride, gluttony, lust. I mean, things, animalistic,
Envy, greed.
Yeah, animalistic pleasures. Things that you want are denied by you, are denied by the dude you're trying to emulate. So, in order to become more like him, you take things from yourself.
Dumb. Don't like it. But it also leads to that being mirrored in the left-hand path through, like, oh God, what's the word I'm looking for here? Anathema rituals.
Yeah.
Or anachronisms, whichever one.
No, anachronism is something out of time.
Yeah.
Anathema is...
An anathema ritual, where you take something that you hold to be sacred and then purposefully blaspheme it.
Yeah.
Or secularize it, or denounce it.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that is kind of, you look at it through, like, if you're looking through the looking glass, they are very closely related to one another.
Right. But not to say that, you know, there's nothing valid whatsoever in abstinence at all. In fact, that's one of the forms of gnosis that we teach, which is there's the whole excitatory versus inhibitory, and you're inhibiting yourself by abstaining from things. So you can abstain from sleep, you can abstain from eating, which will lead to gnosis. It's just the inhibitory ones tend to be harder to do,
and they also take longer.
Yep.
Whereas if you're doing excitatory gnosis, exercise, dancing, drumming, you can achieve that in a matter of minutes, maybe an hour.
Versus days.
Inhibitory gnosis, you're talking about fasting for 3 to 5 days.
Right. Not sleeping for days.
For a day to 3 days before you start hitting that Gnostic state. But you're also, like, in my mind, and it's just because in my background I've done a lot more inhibitory work through meditation.
Yeah.
It's more reliable to me. I'm able to recognize and utilize that better.
Right.
But again, and this goes back to reading Phil Hine again. Heineken. Anyways. Through reading Condensed Chaos, understanding that personal experience trumps. Like, what works for you, and that's more important than what a book says.
Right.
Okay, so I would be interested in hearing you have basically identified Yara as a left-hand path-centric magician.
Yeah.
Do you have any, like, technique or anything that you're comfortable talking about that you perform regularly that you would be able to kind of like dissect and analyze as a left-hand path thing?
I mean, that's hard because I incorporate so many other things that aren't necessarily just left-hand path centric.
Well, can you talk about something that you do and then analyze it?
Okay, so
Like we could as a group kind of break down.
okay, so the one thing that I do consistently is like I do this without fail is Veneration of My Deity. And so I do this every week. Every day on a Monday, which it'll be, what time is it right now?
It's got about 2.5 hours.
Yeah, so I've got about 2.5 hours before I go and venerate my deity, which I do it every week. And if I can't do it on that Monday, then I do it during a Saturnalian hour at the soonest possibility. But again, every week I do the same thing, which is an evocation. I repeat something over and over again until that, and then I go after I've repeated that thing 7 times, then I go through this huge
Like a prayer, basically. Yeah. It's an affirmation.
Yeah, there's a giant prayer, and then I repeat the thing 7 times again, and then I go through all of the steps like lighting incense and application of alcohol and tincture and lighting candles, and then I smoke a cigar and say prayers, and then let the cigar burn out, and then do the reverse, do it again. Well, I say the closing prayer kind of things, blow out the candles, and then close. So that's the thing I do most consistently every week, without fail.
So, in my mind, your intent in that, and knowing the deity, like knowing of the deity that you work with, which, and correct me if I'm wrong on saying this, it's a death deity.
It is death.
What?
Not just a deity. It is death.
When I say a death deity,
I get it. I'm just being a dick.
But well, I mean, for the listener,
yeah.
It is using the information model. It is how if you look at something as a death deity or a war deity or a love deity or whatever, utilizing information model, what you're doing is codifying that.
Yeah, you're anthropomorphizing that and that idea.
Yeah, you basically, you're taking a program and plugging that in because that's your understanding of that aspect.
Right.
So using that and working with like within this anti-cosmic paradigm, your intent is inherently left-hand path.
Yes.
However, the method and the way that you are venerating this deity is borrowing very heavily from right-hand path tradition.
Right.
Because it's about showing devotion.
Yes.
It's also you are giving of yourself. You are giving these gifts and offerings, the incense, the smoke, the alcohol, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And it's to,
and 13 black beans.
Yeah, and you're doing this to bring in the benevolence of this deity.
Well, not so much benevolence as
benevolence towards you.
More attention.
A favor?
Yeah.
But you're doing it in a way to establish this relationship.
Yeah, that would be more appropriate because the one I'm dealing with, not so much benevolence because he's pretty much ambivalent about everything. It's more like, oh, you're paying attention to me. Cool. Okay, so you've done that for me? All right, I could do a favor, but if you stop doing it, he just stops paying attention to you.
Yeah. And there's a whole like prescribed thing for
it's a whole goddamn thing.
For establishing that link and then reestablishing that link if it doesn't, like if you give up on it or whatever. But the point being, like, you can look at any practice and see both things present.
Oh, yeah.
There's not just one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of goes back, Cologne, to what you were saying at the top about people kind of just taking these things and making them fit. Like, that's what everybody does. It's
Yeah.
the same reason that fucking idiot factory workers call themselves capitalists, even though they don't own any
capital.
fucking capital. Like,
Yep.
you're taking a concept and you're making it fit the thing that you want so that you can feel like you're not a failure.
Even though what they're trying to fit in is a square block and a circle hole.
Yeah. But that's the idea, right?
Yeah.
I would definitely overall ascribe that totally left-hand path.
Yeah.
But
No, there are aspects in it. The only thing that it's there, the thing that it's lacking from right hand path
is the overall intent.
Well,
First of all.
well, absolutely yes,
And
that's
that's
overall intent.
just from
But-
working within this current at
Yeah.
all
Yeah,
is
the overall intent is inherently left-hand path, what I'm working in. However, what it's missing from, or it's things that it's having or shares with right-hand path, or a consistent devotion, because that, with consistent devotion, that is, say, within the right-hand path idea, by performing consistent devotion, you are consistently and within your life tuning yourself to the motion of the universe, the will of God, whatever you call it. And so my constant devotion, it's not so much attuning myself to the will of my deity or the concept of it. It's more like he's just always on my mind, because by doing so it increases that power.
well, you're doing it in a way to establish a connection and gain from it.
Right.
Like, it's not
It's, again, means to an end.
Yeah, it's not about understanding what this deity has in store and just being in tune with what's going on. It's about establishing this connection the same way that you would with a pusher. Like,
Yeah.
that way,
again,
when you need something,
yeah.
you've got somebody to go to.
Right. It's, again, means to an end. If it takes right-hand path techniques in order to gain the ability to do what I want, which is left-hand path, then sure, fuck it, I'll do it. But, yeah, so there's that aspect to it, which I'm totally fine with doing. But, so, essentially, you could say that my intent is left-hand path, while my technique is more right-hand path.
Yeah, the same thing we had broken down with with Goetia, and also understanding that, like, just the different ways in which you and I process things, kind of is a big informative step on that. Cologne, do you have anything that you would ascribe to doing that you do as like a regular-ish ritual that you would want to analyze?
Well, I was thinking about I don't do it every year, but I sometimes use Lent as a paradigm, which is obviously, we've been talking Christianity is mostly right-hand path. So I'm using this more the technique and the manners of it, but I'm subverting it to use for my own purposes. Just because it's a paradigm I'm familiar with, having grown up Catholic.
Yeah.
So real quick, just for the sake, break down what Lent traditionally is.
Lent is basically a time period where you would abstain for 40 days from something or deny yourself something in order to bring yourself closer to Christ, at least in Catholicism, or ready yourself for Easter. And or Good Friday, I think technically is the end of Lent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and so in that time, it's, again, with the 40 days, it's hearkening back to Christ's temptation in the desert.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And the idea is by giving up some aspect of your habit or a worldly pleasure, you are invoking or inviting godliness.
You bring yourself closer, yes, to be more Christ-like, be more God-like. But I often just use it as a way, like last year I actually went to a Catholic Mass because I just wanted to draw on that power for myself, like this sort of, this great big ritual it is magic, it is ritual, and drawing on their belief that doing this for 40 days is something magical and something that I kind of drew on it the way I wanted to help me become stronger.
You're
and then
subverting it.
Exactly. And I also had like my own ritual that we did, that I brought in something to be something that is traditionally like a Catholic symbol or item. I had it anointed with more of a magical anointment in order to kind of subvert the use of it, and had kind of developed my own sort of prayer using mudra and a sort of incantation or banishment that is kind of tied with it, that I would then also use that item that's generally used in Christianity in my own way, using my own mantra. So
Nice.
Cool. So that again is kind of like, that's more of the subversion technique, where you're taking this thing that is inherently right-hand path and stealing it, basically.
yes.
And you are basically, you're emancipating that power. You're taking something that an
You're attributing
establishment-
your own meaning to it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You're taking something that an establishment has concocted, and like, well, this is a way to keep yourself in line. You're like, nah, fuck that. I'm taking it and I'm using it to empower myself, which is left-hand path.
Right, which is it's interesting. This just reminded me right now the conversation I had online about the whole concept of the maiden mother crone archetype, which someone was like, no, it's interesting and great, and
which, for again, kind of break down what that is.
Okay, so the maiden mother crone is an archetype which represents the different stages of a woman's life. A maiden, which is before she is married, and she's youthful and joyous and whatever. The mother, who, after she has been married, has a child and is going through the stages of raising the child and becomes nurturing and a caregiver. And then the crone, which is after the children have gone away, she is able to focus on more esoteric things. It's more about wisdom and knowledge and things like that. But I had told this person that I inherently see the maiden mother crone as a patriarchal structure, as it breaks down the roles of women and their usefulness. They didn't see it that way, and that's fine, differing opinions, but I do understand and am totally for women using that as an empowering technique, and I've seen women use that as an empowering thing, because they see it as, so since there are three of them, aligning it with the goddess Hecate and the mother of witchcraft, the triple moons, triple goddess, that kind of thing. I've seen it being used in an empowering manner, despite the fact that I firmly believe that it is a very patriarchal kind of subduing
Construct.
subduing construct. It's pointing out the usefulness of women. Like, those are the three stages, how they're useful. They're useful young, as children, they're useful as mothers, and then afterwards they become crones. They become old, and like, you can cast them aside then. But that's my opinion. But I've seen plenty of women embrace it, and that's totally dope and left-hand path.
And it goes back to the idea of personal experience being the most important indicator.
Yeah.
If through your experience of working with that archetype, it has led to results for you, then use it. Your opinion, my opinion, nobody else's opinion matters. Something in a book doesn't matter if you found a way to use that and utilize it effectively.
Right.
That is kind of the crux of chaos magic.
Yep.
So going back to this idea for Lent, do you still follow like a lot of the traditional rules of Lent, or do you kind of twist those as well?
Last year I did decide to abstain from like meat on Fridays, just as like go ahead and do some of those sort of things. that's pretty much the only one really, other than like basically choosing something to abstain from and using that time for more magical work or personal work. And I decided to abstain on Fridays from meat because I thought it just helped me focus on like a weekly sort of, I have to think about my food and what I'm eating, which just puts me in a mind state to be thinking about this thing that I'm doing. And in some forms of Lent, like you are supposed to like pray every day or whatever. So like that, using the Christian item in a way that was not using Christian prayers at all, using my own sort of prayers, my own mantra and everything on it. And used it that way.
Okay, cool. So yeah, that's very like there are certain books that I have read where they talk about basically doing subversive things of like it's the example that comes to mind is a Señor La Muerte thing where in certain SLM cults, what they will do is they will take a fetish and they will hide it under a, some other thing that they want to be blessed. But what they really want to be blessed is the fetish skull or the fetish statue or whatever it is that they're going to use to venerate SLM. And then they'll take it to a Catholic priest to have them bless this thing in a bowl or whatever. That's hiding the
nice.
the
Oh yeah.
Just
hiding
sneak it
the
in
death
there.
statue.
Yeah. Like that. Yeah. Within the kind of worship thing I'm working with, the resources that I've used had talked about that. It's your talismans or that are like you use like what most right-hand path would consider disgusting or wrong or terrible, and you use that in order to create a talisman, and that talisman becomes so much more powerful if it can become blessed by an actual Catholic priest.
Yeah, and so the common tactic is to hide it, basically. Or
Sneaky magic.
or another thing you can do is you take the pieces individually, have them blessed individually, and then assemble this like
Magic by IKEA.
Yeah, basically. I remember the last time I went to IKEA, and then I accidentally summoned the old gods trying to pick out a fucking couch.
Smurgendorf.
The Hoofsgassel.
Yep.
Oh my god, dude, I need to get a honk ball jersey. So, but no, that's dope as fuck. I personally like I latch on a lot more to that kind of subversive style of doing stuff. Not that I discredit the, anti-cosmic aspects of Left Hand Path. But to me, like it's more about the way you go about it, right? In order to, I'm more kind of focused on the idea that in order to beat the system, you have to know the system. And so
right, it's kind of back to that whole concept of keep your enemies close, keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. So like, them better. There's another quote which was like the best way to create an atheist is to have them read the entire Bible.
Yeah, I've
go to
studied
Catholic school.
Yeah. I've studied the Bible, that's why I'm a wizard.
Yeah.
Like but understanding it's really changed the way that I look at like American conjure. Or hoodoo, or like even like Louisiana voodoo. Although voodoo is a little bit different because voodoo is a religion as opposed to a system, or like a practical application. But even if you look at the history of voodoo and syncretization of Catholic saints, like that is a subversive technique.
Yeah.
It's a very subversive religion that has its history grounded in slaves had to hide this or
them.
else they were fucking murdered. Like, so because of that, it lends itself in conjure, in reading about like, folk magic in America. there's a lot of like, okay, well, you do this thing and you're reading from the Bible. There's a 7-day healing ritual that I've utilized several times for myself and for other people. And it involves reading passages from Psalms.
No, a lot of hoodoo magic does that. In fact, there are several resources that you can find that have each one of the psalms is attributed to a different outcome. So, like, okay, take for instance the example of like a voodoo doll. What you can do is most commonly a voodoo doll or anything like that is created for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And you create a voodoo doll of yourself, and then what you'll do is you'll take that, and depending on what the desired outcome is, you'll say a psalm over it that will basically give that outcome to you. And I've done that before. I have a voodoo doll created of myself, and what I would do is I have these white-headed pins that you would say psalms over, and then like you can put them into the voodoo doll in a place where you need healing.
Mm-hmm. That is probably the most common use of a voodoo doll, is that you're using it to basically as a form of sympathetic magic. So you fill that dolly with aspects of yourself, like hair, nail clippings, blood. You put yourself into it so that it is connected to you.
Yeah.
And then by enacting rites of magic over it, saying prayers over these pins and pushing these pins where you need the healing, you are creating that same link.
Yeah.
Or
Or just even saying the psalm over it, because there's psalms for wealth. There are psalms for, like, job opportunities. There are psalms for, like, protection from things. There's all sorts of, like, every one of the 100 and whatever psalms there are.
137?
Something like that.
I don't know.
Each one of them has its own aspect or its own, attribution. So by saying that psalm over the doll, like, you're basically praying over that doll that this thing that you are doing will happen using that psalm as an incantation.
You are also, like, the encore. I was going to say important and core, and I mixed them together and said in core. The important thing to differentiate is that in hoodoo, you are looking at the Old Testament primarily as codified information.
Yeah.
It's not that the Psalms themselves hold power. It's that within the Old Testament, there are hidden spells.
Right. It's
There
like
are-
that bullshit book from like 15 years ago, the Bible Code.
Yeah!
Like that one.
Dude. That just made me think of the old, do you remember the Bible Man tapes?
Yes.
Oh my God. We should create a system of magic around Bible Man.
Oh, God.
It'd be great.
We still need to start up a conspiracy theory thing.
Oh yeah. We'll work on that. That's a thing that'll be forthwith sometime this year. Anyways, put a pin in that. After saying a psalm over it,
Ho!
look at that, dude. Hacksaw Jim Duggan. So, but you're looking at this as literally a codified spell book. It's not that the Bible itself has power. It's that the people who wrote the Bible were hiding information.
Yeah.
They were hiding secrets in
Right.
there. So by
Well,
reading
even the Gnostics believed that. I mean,
Mhm.
you take the New Testament, the entire concept of allegories within the Bible.
Yeah.
Like it's all in there. Like there's hidden knowledge, and by reading it correctly, you understand the truth.
yeah. And that's translated into American folk magic.
Yeah.
You can look at there's kind of this weird hodgepodging of Protestant and Catholic belief in folk magic.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's not important what you believe. It's important that you believe the work works.
Right. And I mean, there's the whole mixture with folk magic and the veneration of saints and shit.
Mm-hmm.
So,
But yeah, that's like a thing that I've done before, and I do a lot of stuff that is centered around kind of folk magic and conjure work. And to
would
me,
you say there's anything inherently right hand path about it apart from the imagery?
So one thing that's kind of important to distinguish in hoodoo is there are different concepts of right hand and left hand.
Right.
In hoodoo, right hand and left hand refer to the worker's intent.
Okay. So you're following more of the philosophy.
It's sort of. The intent is different.
Okay.
It's important in hoodoo, it's important to work with both hands.
Okay.
Is what the concept is called. The right hand is for defense, it's for healing, it's for benevolence, it's for stuff that's like good.
Okay.
The left hand is for offense, attacking, laying tricks, cursing.
So it kind of like, so within hoodoo, the difference between left hand and right hand is the difference between the common concept of white and black magic.
Yes. However, it's also important to realize that in hoodoo, there is no such thing as evil.
Yeah.
It's warranted and unwarranted. So, working with your left hand, laying tricks for people, hexes, jinxes, curses, these things are not evil. It's a matter of whether or not they are truly warranted.
Okay.
So you have to be careful about doing things
Mm-hmm.
because you also have to understand that this is coming from a time when it was much more accepted.
Right.
A lot more people were doing this.
Right.
So the idea was, okay, I'm going to lay a trick on my neighbor because my neighbor has much more bountiful crops than I do, and I think it's because my neighbor has cursed my land.
Right.
So I'm going to lay a trick for them.
Well, yeah, and we had talked about this earlier, like the whole concept of like curse has a bad name, where it's like you assume you've cursed someone, it means something absolutely terrible is going to happen. You could just curse someone with the idea that they're going to be late to their job.
I hope you stub your toe.
Yeah.
Is the best curse I've ever heard. It's
Yeah.
amazing. But so the idea is in hoodoo, it's important to work with both hands.
Yeah.
It's important to understand that all of this is connected.
Well, yeah, and it kind of goes along with the Buddhist idea of the middle path. So you have to be a balanced person. You can't choose complete abstinence in something because then you're depriving yourself of something else.
Yeah, very much so. That being said, I would consider conjure inherently left-hand path in the fact that it is a subversive magic. However, there are right-hand path aspects to it because what you do, one of the traditional things that you do in hoodoo before you do any spell is you do what's called a spell-checking divination.
Yeah.
And what you do is traditionally it's done with tarot, but you can do it because cartomancy is a big thing in hoodoo.
Yeah.
But you can do it with any form of divination. Dough fired from a gun romancy.
Best divination.
Ravioli-mancy.
Yeah. Second best.
Whatever it is. But the idea is before you do any work, you do a divination to figure out the outcome.
Yeah.
And that is the universe, that is the ash and the spirits telling you what the outcome is going to be if you do this work. So let's go back to the idea of cursing my neighbor's land because I think he's put a curse on my land and that's why he has good crops and I have shitty crops.
Yeah.
I do this divination. That divination will tell me what the outcome is going to be first. First of all, it's going to tell me what my true intent is.
Okay.
It's going to tell me the right hand and left hand aspects of the work that I plan on doing. So what is the benevolence or the defense or the light work?
Yeah.
What is the offense? What is the attack? What is the left work?
Right.
And then it's going to tell me a hindrance and it's going to tell me an outcome. So by looking at that divination, I can then see if I am in tune, which is right hand.
Yep.
Oh, fuck, it isn't actually what's going on. This is going to be bad if I do this. I'm going to fuck myself worse. Or the outcome is going to be good for me. So you do that. Like, divination is a huge part of magic in hoodoo.
Yeah,
there are certain tarot spreads that you can do to show whether or not you're cursed at all.
Yeah.
Like, you're supposed to do divination to find out if you think you are cursed. You do a divination to find out what's really going on.
Right.
So you have to be in tune with the spirits. You have to be in tune with the world around you. That is right-hand path.
Right. So there's an underlying current of following the order of the universe then.
Of at least understanding it.
Right.
Then it's up to the practitioner to choose. Like, you can choose. I could look at a divination and see, like, okay, well, my land's not actually being cursed. I'm not actually being worked against. But also, kind of fuck my neighbor. He doesn't need all of the good crops. I need some too. I could decide to do a work for that anyways if I wanted to.
Okay.
And it's not inherently evil.
Right.
But you need to be armed and ready for repercussions.
Yeah.
So it is very much about, yes, understanding your place, but it's also knowing that there is a freedom for you to choose your place.
Yeah.
But you have to play by the rules.
Mm-hmm.
You can twist those rules. You can bend those rules. You can, if you relate it to chaos magic, you can bend that probability.
Yeah.
But you can't break it.
Yep.
So in that way, it's kind of a very fluid hodgepodge of belief.
Back to that very fucking fine line between
Yeah.
black and gray, left and right.
And it is very much a gray practice. Because it accepts the idea. And if you look at the history and how hoodoo and voodoo and conjure and folk, how all of that made it to America.
Yeah.
There is this very big aspect of paying.
Yeah.
You pay for shit that gets done.
Mhm.
Not necessarily always with money, but like if you petition the spirits for work, you pay those spirits.
Yeah.
If you ask a worker to do something for you, you pay them.
Yeah.
And that comes from generations of fucking stealing labor in the form of slavery.
Yeah.
Like, it's important to pay it forward. That's a very big thing. And as you understand that history, you see that, like, there is no good or evil. There is doing what you can and doing what you have to.
Yeah.
A lot of slaves used magic to get out of the situations they were in. And it involved violence. It involved murder. It involved stealing and things that would be considered wrong by the system.
Subversion.
But they understood that the system wasn't built to benefit them, so they had no problem subverting the system.
Right.
Yeah.
They had no problem doing what they had to do. You killed your fucking master if you had to get out. And if it meant staying alive, then it wasn't wrong for you to murder that person.
Yeah.
That's the understanding. I kind of forget how I got on this whole rant. But the point is, you can look at any practice and see both philosophies present.
Mm-hmm.
The trick is to understand what they are at their core.
Yeah.
And then you can kind of
It's like
map what you're doing.
Yeah. Kind of like Cologne had said, like technique versus philosophy.
Yes.
Like what's the intent versus what you're doing.
Yes. And understanding that they are not mutually exclusive things.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Not only, like, technique and philosophy don't exist in vacuums.
No.
But not only that, right hand and left hand don't exist in vacuums. Nobody is 100% right hand path or 100% left hand path.
No. And if anyone says they are, they're fucking lying.
Yes. 100%. Because anybody who says they're 100% left hand path still exists in the same system that we exist in, and they still are subject to the laws. Like, okay, you're a left hand path magician. Don't pay your taxes for 6 years and see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, they're either a total fucking edgelord or a hypocrite.
Yeah. And it's the same with someone who says they're 100% right hand path.
Yeah.
Like, that is what it is. So we're going to do another quick break. We're going to come back, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the challenges from last episode, and we're going to bring up some challenges for this next episode.
And then we have something exciting and new.
Oh, yeah! So we'll be right back.
The Faith Blind Council would like to take this time to give a very heartfelt thank you to West of Hell. At westofhell.com, you can find handmade occult artifacts, ranging from ritual leather masks, prayer beads, clephotic mirrors, and other tools of the craft, some even made from human bone. Their resident artist, Curse Carter, creates these pieces with an anti-cosmic and adversarial intent. With years of experience in art forms like tattooing and leathercraft, if the tool you're looking for isn't offered, let them know. Commissions are always welcome. So go out and support West of Hell by visiting their website at westofhell.com. That's WESTOVHELL.com.
That was a perfect time to hit record again.
Good. Excellent.
I'm keeping it.
Whatever. Fuck it. I don't care.
Okay, so we're back, and we're going to talk about some things now. Why do I keep saying dumb shit? I don't know. Doesn't matter. So last episode, we had talked about creating a Saturnalia Ritual.
Yeah, the last episode was about winter festivals, holidays, end of the year holidays, kind of things.
I'm saying that mostly for myself so I can remember.
Yeah.
Because we're good at taking notes.
Yeah. One of us is.
It's not me.
Nope, not me either.
Fuck. Okay, so...
Thanks for playing. Thanks for taking one for the team, Cologne.
It's great. All right, so the last episode was about creating a Saturnalia Ritual. That was my challenge. And then, Yara, your challenge was to incorporate something from one of the winter festivals that we had talked about.
Okay. I think I may have had slightly different notes written down, but basically what
I thought mine was like create your own
holiday.
Create your own.
Oh, yeah,
just,
yeah,
do a holiday. I did take inspiration from some of those other holidays. You'll see it immediately when I start talking about it.
Did you collect a shitload of needles?
No, I know I like that one, but that's not exact. I did do something that's more on the animus.
Did you
things,
drink a whole bunch of wine?
No.
So I found out recently.
I poured some whiskey on a pair of boots.
Did you tear a goat apart?
I'm not that cool yet.
Fuck. Me neither.
I did find out recently. I read a book about the evolution of religion and shit, and they were talking about the Dionysian ritual, and it was a week-long ritual. The second day in Greece, all they did, you gathered in your home, every family member was meant to drink 2 liters of wine.
Jesus!
And just sit there in silence thinking about bad, sad things. That was the festival. That was day 2. You just drink 2 liters of wine through the day and be sad.
I'm not a fan of that. Seems very Billy Joel. Ugh. Okay, so let's talk about Cologne's holiday, Cologne Day.
Yeah, I didn't think of a good name until afterwards. I kind of called it the Holiday of the Old Boots, but
I like that.
I dig that a lot.
But the boots are not. I decided that it doesn't have to be boots. It could be anything else. But basically,
Footwear.
Well, something basically.
Footwear
I took an item. It doesn't have to be footwear. Just something that you've used a lot, maybe for years, or it's just
throughout.
You've used for a long time. You've used it up. It's not usable anymore, but it's still there.
Okay.
And
like the needles.
And as someone who does get sentimental by objects, even after they're I had these old pair of boots that I wore them out years ago, but refused to throw them out.
Okay.
So created a sort of holiday or ritual around them. So I basically set up, for lack of any better room, an altar for the boots. Basically just a table, someplace where they can sit, where they stand alone. And then I did 5 days because it's how many days I kind of had to do it.
Okay.
That's fair.
As set up the altar and basically give the boots a gift each day and say a memory to them. I remember doing this, and
basically telling them their story, basically.
Yes, yeah. And then So doing that 5 days, so like gifts included, I gave him a pair of socks. Because I always wear like the same socks. Because I'm a person, like I wear the same socks. I go back to the store, I buy the same socks every time. So I gave him a pair of socks.
Not like the same pair of socks.
No, but the same kind of socks. And so I gave
I was
him
going
a
to
pair
say
of those socks.
you should probably put the altar for the socks.
And it should be in the washer.
Might be burn pile by that point. But if there's any left, I gave him a CD I bought at a punk show, like because I wore them a lot going to a show because they're boots.
Punk rock boots.
And gave him a piece of a tile outside of, I don't know if you guys remember the Thirsty Camel. It's a bar. Yeah, well, it got bought, it closed. I happened to be there while they were closing, and the tile outside the front, there was some loose tile. I took one. I didn't know why. I just took one.
Fuck
And
yeah,
I
dude.
thought, like,
Stealing shit.
It's magical as fuck.
it was loose, and there's like tiles, and they're just gonna rip it up anyways. So I took the tile and thought, well, I went there before in these boots, so gave it tile something to walk across, and a matchbook set from a store called Taboo in Chicago, which isn't there anymore, but because I wore them when I was in Chicago, wouldn't remind him of being in Chicago. And then poured some whiskey on them one day because I like whiskey and my boots like
because
whiskey.
I'm pretty sure they were soaked in whiskey.
These boots were made for whiskey.
And that's just what they'll do.
Whiskey for my boots.
So at the end of those days, I thanked them for their service, and I would have liked to have given like a bigger send-off, like burn them or bury them something, but it wasn't really going to work out. So I decided, like, okay, I've got to let the spirit of the boots out somehow.
Yeah.
So basically, like, burning a little sage, I put some sandalwood and frankincense on it because I read that's something that helps release a spirit. So, like, okay, your spirit can be free from these boots because I am going to release you. I'm going to get rid of these boots. They ultimately went in the trash, unfortunately. But but I released the spirit before doing so.
At that point, it's just an item.
Yes, exactly. And that was my mentality. Like, it's just an item now. I can get rid of them. I don't have sentimental attachment to it anymore. And so
Very
I
cool.
felt like that's why, like, the old boots, like, because I was thinking, well, I could do a pair of shoes every year. I'm like, well, do I have a pair of shoes to throw out every year? I might not. I'm not somebody who buys a lot of shoes, so it could be anything.
Yeah, just something you're keeping hanging around for sentimental reasons.
Exactly.
Yeah, a thing that's outgrown its purpose or whatever
but
it is.
it's still meaningful in some way.
Yeah.
Other things about that was I thought about after the fact. I didn't think of any carols to sing. I'm like, I should have came up with carols, and I didn't. So
These
next
boots
year.
are made for walking.
It's like, I didn't sing any. Like, I should have sang them in songs, and I didn't do that. So that was. So that's
You
the
just
holiday
imagine
little
someone
boots.
walking in and you're singing to your boots.
That would have been so great. That would have been so good. What are you?
You're just sitting there pouring whiskey on your boots, singing
One
for
for
some
me?
fucking Billy Joel song while you pour whiskey on your boots.
What are you doing? Magic. Shut up.
Me and my boots are doing magic.
No, I love that. I love the idea of especially things that are just kind of taking up space, but that you're only keeping for sentimental value.
Mm-hmm.
But as a kind of big to do about, it's fine. I am here during this time, appreciating everything that you have done, everything you mean to me, but it's time to let you go.
Yeah.
I also, the thing that I think it's actually really apropos that you just threw them out. And here's why. A lot of people think about an anathema ritual as you have to destroy this fucking... You're not destroying the idea.
You're just
Yeah.
blaspheming.
You're secularizing it.
Yeah.
You are making it unimportant. And so by releasing the spirit of the boots, it is an anathema ritual because now they're just an item.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's just a thing now. And what do you do with things? You just throw them out when they're not useful anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of like the ultimate blasphemy. I forget whose quote it is, but there's a quote of the opposite of love isn't hate. The opposite of love is apathy.
Yeah.
Andy Dick.
That seems like a very Andy Dick.
Yeah. Quite the sage.
That's a very, very Andy Dick. A very Dickensian quote.
Yeah.
But what you're doing there is you are treating that thing now as unimportant because now it's just an item. And I think that was actually the most apropos way of going about it, because you didn't give them this, like, if you would have given them this, like, great send-off of torching them or
The
whatever.
Fucking Viking funeral for a pair of boots.
That was the
Although
initial
I would really
idea,
like
but
to
it's
see
just like
that.
it wasn't practical. So I started thinking of other ways. Well, how do I feel right about just throwing them out?
And-
Well, I think there's something there. Like I'm attached to something, some sort of spirit, whatever I want to call it. But psychologically, I'm attached to them.
Yeah.
So I gotta do something to detach.
Yeah. And that's also, I mean, that's the magic working, right? Because throughout the course of the ritual, you are detaching your sentimentality.
Yeah, I'm becoming able to just.
Yeah,
throw them
you
out,
you
which
are
is what I need to freaking do with them.
yeah, you're no longer viewing them as this like great, thing that you have this attachment to. Now they're just boots. They're just old boots that aren't.
Yeah, it was just kind of like a 5-day long funeral for the boots.
Yep.
Kind of. And it was something that I think works really well as a means of getting rid of the not just the stuff that you don't use anymore, but training your mind to view them as just a thing. Like it's very, very psychological model.
And as someone who hoarders exist in my family, like, this is a good way to train my brain to not go down that path, because those traits they exist in me and I realize it. So sometimes I have to be like, I need to be able to detach and just get rid of things.
I think
They're not useful.
it works excellent as an example of how I want to be treated when I die. Just have a 5-day long funeral and then throw me in the trash.
Body farm.
I'm really upset that it's illegal to be buried in some dude's field with a sign on you that says Andy did it. I'm so mad about it, because what a great prank that would be, like 40 years down the line, to just open some cold case like, okay, here's what I want you to do. When I die, stab me and leave something in after I'm dead, right? And then bury me somewhere where when they find me, it's just like, a body doesn't go there. And then there's just a sign that says like fucking like Steve did this or whatever. And people are like, this is like the weirdest cold case ever. What the fuck? And it ends up on like fucking Reddit mysteries, and all those like fucking rabbit hole YouTube guys do a video on it. And then
What was it?
Yes.
turns out
40 years down the future, this dude was an asshole.
turns out like this dude was just a fucking prankster. What a doofus. Like, how great would that be?
I wasted man hours and taxpayer money from beyond the grave.
Left-hand path, subvert the system, show everybody that it's dumb.
Yep.
There it is. So yeah, no, very cool. That's a dope-ass ritual.
So the other one was your challenge, Dreadnought, which was to do something Saturnalian.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that one, okay, so I kind of feel like I failed at this one, but I learned something from it. So I'll go over what
that's part of magic. It's part of doing
do,
anything.
What I had planned to do, what actually happened, and why I feel like I went about it the wrong way, and maybe how I could have done it differently. So, like, I guess I kept getting hung up a lot on Saturnalia and doing things opposite for myself, but I was really hung up on, like, fixing things about me. I think I was hung up about, like, trying to do things the opposite, like, hung up on my negative aspects and doing the opposite of those things.
Oh, okay.
Gotcha.
And, like, I feel like that was maybe the wrong way to go about it. Because, so one of the things I was going to do for Saturnalia, and I only had, like, really one day, worked a lot of hours in December, and so I had, like, one day, so I'm like, okay, I'm going to get up early, which I don't do much, because it's don't work in the morning, and I wanted to basically eschew, like, procrastination, and just, like, get on things, do things, like, not to be distracted by things, so not
You're going to make yourself into a morning person.
Basically, and, add some hot, like, like I said, I feel like I went about this totally the wrong way. And I was going to do like a sun salutation in the morning and do things like, and do at least one thing where I reach out to a friend because I tend to be very hermited and I don't reach out to people. So right off the get-go, I apparently forgot to set my alarm.
Yes. Got this big ritual, and I'm going to do it, and everything's going to change, except for the one thing that starts it off.
The one thing that's supposed to start this thing off. So
Off on the right foot.
And I remember setting the alarm, but there's like this little quirk where you have to save the alarm on the phone.
Yeah.
I didn't save it. That's probably what happened. I was supposed to wake up at 7:30. I wake up at 10:30. I'm like...
You've just described my college career.
It's like, God damn it. So I still attempt to go through the other aspects of it, but it really does make me...
So much for that sun salutation. He's already halfway up in the sky.
Well, at least the sun's up, so I do the damn salutation. It actually is even
What's
better
up, dude?
because
It's been a while.
it's right in the southern sky where my window is, so it's even better.
You sure that's not what woke you up?
Maybe.
Hey,
Well, no,
hey! Get up now! Get up!
all the windows are on the north side of my bedroom, but yeah. So I do that, and to an extent, I pretty much do all the other things, but I just totally thrown off with not getting up in the morning.
You just weren't in the right headspace because of like...
But it also, in some ways, twisting and rationalizing it. It's like, well, things didn't start off the way I wanted to, and a lot of times I would just throw in the fucking towel and be like, fuck this, it's not happening, but instead I do. I do everything I can to make it happen. But, so like I said before, I feel like I was a little too focused on, like, transforming myself with good habits and not thinking of other ways like transformation or like other forms of like being opposite of myself or something. And I can't say I thought of any particularly profound different things I could have done.
Yeah.
But I was thinking like maybe if I had to take it so seriously, I could have also just done something like worn different types of clothing or done something like other type of symbolic things that I didn't do.
Mm-hmm.
And was like really focused on behaviors.
Yeah.
And that.
Okay.
So that's kind of how I felt about it.
So one thing with kind of like a Saturnalia ritual, that is a very common kind of like pitfall that people fall into, is that they do think about it as this inherently transformative thing. The thing with Saturnalia is that there was an expectation, and everybody knew that things are going to go back to normal after it's over. And so because of that, it's not necessarily a transformation. It's just a celebration of weird backwards ass shit.
Yeah, and that was like I was too much thinking of something that's like this is going to be a stepping stone towards being different and better and blah blah blah, which not
isn't
really
wrong.
what it was.
That's
No.
a good thing to think about.
Right. But I mean how we had described it in the last one, especially with how the church had taken it over, where they crown the Bishop of Fools or the Pope of Fools, and they like start burning shoes in the fucking incense censer. Like, you take things from the status quo and you kind of mock them.
You flip it and reverse it, just like that Missy Elliott song.
So you would take something that means something to you that you realize is silly, and then you would just have a time where you're like, no, this thing that I take seriously that doesn't really matter at all is kind of just silly, so I'll make fun of it.
What I feel like,
I went at a totally
I
different
feel
attitude.
like you actually came closer to doing that with your boot ritual.
Yeah. No,
No, like, and I'm not
seriously.
saying that in a mean
No,
way.
I
no,
feel that
I
the same
get
way.
it. Now that you say it, yeah, it makes sense.
Because you took this thing that was, very important to you, and you realized these habits that you had of like, there's a hoarder mentality that exists in my family, and you just disregarded it, and you were just kind of like, whatever. But you took this idea of symbolism in magic. The idea that, like, oh, these have to be these great, crazy, big symbols. Like, I have to use all of this, like, stuff from the Zodiac and the Tree of Life. And you're like, what if I just use fucking boots? Like, it's awesome. Like, it's fucking dope.
No, but at the same time, like, it was a subversion using the whole, like, I'm holding these pair of boots sacred. I'm keeping them around and keeping them to myself. They mean a lot, and I'm going to subvert that by just hucking them in the trash.
Yes.
Yeah, ultimately. Yep.
And so, like,
Yep.
in that way, I think part of what was happening was, it sounds like you kind of were approaching these two different rituals, but you had, in some ways, and the way that I kind of envisioned it was folding both of them into one ritual.
See,
And
I
it sounds
very
like-
distinctly tried to do two separate things. It's
Which
like,
is cool.
It's two assignments,
Yeah, which is totally cool. But it's like almost like subconsciously you had put them both into one. And that's also totally fine. The way that these whole,
So
like,
yeah, for the future, you can do like both challenges at the same time as long as you following through with both challenges.
yeah, and the thing is, like, to view them as assignments, it's more like viewing them almost like a writing prompt.
Yeah.
To kind of spur you into, like, oh, try this thing out. See how
which,
this works.
By the way, the fucking boots were dope.
Yeah, that's a really fucking cool ritual. I like that a lot. And I can appreciate what you were trying to do with the Saturnalia thing. Again, to me, it just seems like you kind of fell in that same trap that a lot of people fall into when they're looking at doing something like that. Is they're kind of foregoing the absurdity of the whole idea.
And like that's after the point I was like, I'm really taking this way too seriously, I feel like.
You put on old boots and stepped off on the wrong foot.
Yeah. One of my favorite, like, if I were to actually craft a legitimate, like, Saturnalia ritual, I would draw probably very heavily from Discordianism. Because Discordianism is almost like permanent Saturnalia when it comes to magic. It's just permanently taking these things that are supposed to be symbols and taken very seriously and being like, yeah, but what if we didn't?
Yeah, like, Discordianism's kind of like, in the early 2000s where all of these kids were like, I'm so random. There's a religion based around that.
Yeah. I'm random, XDDDDDDD, like that shit.
Yeah.
It's scene kid magic.
Yeah.
But it came about in a bowling alley in the 50s or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I think you did a really good job.
Nope, same here. No, you kicked ass. You did a really great job.
So let's move on
to challenges for left hand, right hand.
Yes, for left hand, right hand stuff.
What do you got?
I want you to, this isn't necessarily an active thing, but what I want you to do is I want you to look at your daily practices or your regular practices and catalog what falls into right hand path and what falls into left hand path. And come back with a list that is showing where, based on that list, where you think you fall as a practitioner.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be a huge, like, gigantic thing, but, like, it's more of like an introspective, like.
Yeah, I see the introspective aspect of it. I guess I inherently have a sort of dislike for dichotomies, like, and having to choose one. But I think going through and looking at them is still good to see, like, what aspects of both of these things am I using.
That brings up something that's really interesting. So in the book, Lords of the Left-Hand Path, Flowers had talked about how he didn't really touch into certain Eastern practices because they lacked a dichotomy, such as Taoism or... But... The interesting thing about Taoism is they're the ones who developed the yin-yang symbol. So...
But it's also the concept that yin and yang aren't really that different from each other. They're just kind of arbitrary dichotomies.
They're not, though, because there was another book that I've read that was written by Karen Flowers, which discussed the probability, or the reason why yin and yang were developed was from the Shang dynasty, where the men during the summertime would do all of the hunting and all of the farming and things like that, while the women stayed at home and just took care of the household. While during the wintertime, that's when the women would spend time working, creating clothing and brewing drinks and things like that, which is why the women became the yin And that's why yin is associated with cold. It is associated with darkness. It is associated with the feminine. So all of these things would be done in the wintertime in the household. While yang, on the other hand, is associated with masculinity, light, and effort. Like effort as far as like physical hard labor goes. And so these both become part of the same system. So he didn't really touch on there's a dichotomy that exists within the system. There is a separation between the two, but they are all part of the same system.
The other thing I think is that if you look at the Hermetic principle of polarity, the idea that these two things, if you take two absolutes, right? Like absolute light and absolute darkness, you realize that they are not separate things, but they exist as extreme ends on a spectrum. And that's something that like can absolutely apply to right-hand path and left-hand path.
Right. It's like we discussed this whole time, like we follow a very thin line between the two. There's a very, very broad gray area that no one falls directly on either one. Like I myself consider myself very much left-hand path, but I still do right-hand path techniques and I still follow them and study them and do certain things regarding them. So it's more of, I think what you're saying is where on the left-hand, right-hand spectrum do you fall?
Yeah, like you're mapping where your practice exists currently.
Okay.
It's not that I want you to like, oh, well, I have 6 things in the right-hand path column, but only 5 things in the left-hand path column.
Like a cosmic quiz.
Yeah. I don't want you to do that, but what I want you to do is look at your practice and realize there are probably things that you wouldn't necessarily attribute to being one or the other that you can kind of figure out, oh no, this is right-hand path or this is left-hand path. There will probably be things on there that will fall into both categories.
Yeah.
You know, but it's about being able to kind of have a point where you can map your practice at and then start kind of figuring out, okay, well, month to month or whatever, I've noticed this change in my practice. I'm leaning more this way. Or this has, reverted back to doing more traditional right-hand path stuff. I'm kind of zigzagging around in this spectrum.
Okay.
So my challenge for you is based on left-hand path, and especially based on your experience with what Dreadnought's last challenge for you was with the Saturnalian one. Take something that is inherently meaningful for you and subvert it.
Okay.
So take a habit that you have, take something that you hold a lot of treasure towards, something that means something dear to you.
Like the boots you threw out.
Yeah. Turn it around. So like, for example, if you were to take you had mentioned before in the last episode, you had done something towards, I think, Archangel Michael.
Mm-hmm.
If you were something along the lines of like having a statue of him, say you've been talking to him, praying to him a lot, take that statue of him and defile it.
Okay.
And give a reason for defiling it. Why are you doing this? Take something that you hold sacred, determine like why you hold it sacred, and ruin that, or like that sacrosanct nature of it.
Okay.
I would also, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, it doesn't have to be this gigantic, huge thing. It could be a thing of you being like, I drink coffee every day, and I attach this meaning to it. Well, fuck coffee. Coffee's fucking stupid.
Yeah, just start looking at what things in my life I do attach meaning to, and what do they really need to be sacred, and is holding them sacred something that, like, by not holding it sacred,
and basically
something I could do and
what you're doing
for my will.
Right, and it doesn't have to be a fucking huge thing. I'm not asking you to, like, if you have a statue of like Saint Michael, take him out into town square and then just shit on him in front of everyone. I'm not asking for that, but something that desecrates it in some way. showing that it is just a symbol. It is just something that I'm holding for some arbitrary reason.
And it goes kind of, it sparks this idea that I was, again, reading in Condensed Chaos, of people confusing the map for the territory.
Yeah.
And
symbols are just symbols.
Yeah,
ultimately.
it doesn't mean a statue that you have is not that entity.
Mm-hmm.
No.
An idea of that entity that you have is not that entity. You are just codifying and making it make sense.
Yeah.
And you can decide to not do that anymore. So that's correct me if I'm wrong.
You're absolutely correct. Just it's just a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Understand it. Part of the process is understanding that thing that you are holding with a sacrosanct idea is just a thing. Like, for example, I did a giant ritual like this years and years and years ago. I had collected all of these things from this relationship I had with this person, that they had died, and I kept them for a very, very long time, but they had taken up a lot of room because I collected everything they had. But I realized they were just things. They were like, it doesn't ruin the memory that I had with them. They were just things. It was like pieces of paper, pictures, like, and all the pictures were just other pieces of paper with chemicals on them. That's it. They were just things rearranged in different shapes, and I took the entire box and threw it in the trash. So that, just understand, like, you are holding this idea, this behavior, this thing sacred. Understand why, but understand when you are defiling it, and do defile it. If it is, like, say, a statue of Saint Michael, fucking spit on it. Fucking, like, throw it in the trash can. Cover it with garbage. Like, but understand why you're doing that.
What was that fucking movie that came out a couple of years ago with, it had Adam Driver was in it, and Andrew Garfield was in it, and they played these two monks that went to Japan to basically proselytize Christianity. But the movie ends with an anathema ritual.
Yeah, I got nothing.
Fuck. I can't think of the name of the movie. Liam Neeson is also in it.
You two are the movie nerds, so...
But basically, it ends
All I can
with...
think of is the Righteous Gemstones, which starts with them going to Japan.
No.
But I know it's not the same thing.
Fuck, I can't remember the name of the movie. But anyways, it ends with this giant anathema ritual where Andrew Garfield is like... Basically, he's in this prison camp, and the only way he can get free of the prison camp and not be sentenced to death is to...
I am a monk?
No.
No.
Is to stomp on this picture of Jesus, like this wood burning of Jesus.
Oh, yeah.
And
Silence?
Nope. I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, yep. It's got Adam Driver, Liam Neeson. Directed by Martin Scorsese.
Sounds about right.
2016.
Sounds about right. Anyhow, it's like he's sitting there and he's like, and like the fucking wood burning starts talking to him like, it's okay, you can blah, 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 blah.
Is this a serious drama
Yes.
or a comedy? Because I'm having a hard time telling.
It's my telling of it is comedic, but it's a very serious movie.
Yeah, it was from 2016. It's listed
Martin
as a drama.
Scorsese.
But it's not like coked out
Directing.
Scorsese. It's,
It's not the fun Scorsese.
no. But it's like, and the thing starts talking to him, and so he just starts fucking stomping and stomping and stomping on this picture. But in the very, very end of the movie, he is like years and decades later, and he's dead. And he's like been converted basically to what he does is he works as a customs agent. And as people are coming in through customs, he's looking for Christian paraphernalia and having it thrown out and stuff. But then he dies, and they do a traditional fire burial where they put you in this giant thing and they burn you.
I just
This
imagine
thing.
shoving you in like a 50-gallon drum.
It's
just
kind of like
thing.
burning you in an alleyway.
It's kind of like that. But anyways, the very end of the reveal at the end is he's holding a cross. And the whole point of it is showing that like symbols are just symbols. It's what matters is why you believe in the thing or whatever. But that's kind of what the challenge is about.
Yeah, I think I understand it.
I mostly just wanted to tell a story about Andrew Garfield stepping on Jesus. All right, so that's going to be almost the end of the episode.
Almost.
But we're about to reveal a new fun thing that we got from our Discord server.
God damn it, you dropped the world.
Fuck yeah, dude. But we're about to reveal a new fun thing that we're going to do that we got from our Discord server, which we have one of those now. If you want to join that community, there's a lot of cool shit going on in there. Divination stuff, discussions in general. We're working on doing some actual telemagic rituals. It's going to be fucking dope. But one of the suggestions we got in there was introducing divination to these challenges.
Yep. And not just that, new forms of divination. So things that like other people have an experience with, us or we as practitioners don't have experience with. Just every episode coming out and practicing a new form of divination that we've never done before and just doing it.
So what we're going to start with is something that Yara, you are familiar with.
Yes.
I am not so much familiar with. Kilone, have you done this before? Or
no.
are familiar with? Like...
I'm familiar with what it is, but I haven't personally done it.
So what we're going to do is bibliomancy.
Yep.
The way that bibliomancy works, to my understanding, is you take a book or a newspaper or a magazine or any printed thing.
Written media.
You then formulate your question. You think about what it is you're trying to divine. You then take the written thing, open it up to a random page or pick a random passage from it, and you read until you divine an answer.
Yes. Me, typically, what I'll do is I don't read until I divine an answer. I read the first sentence, and then the first sentence that I fall on, and then that I will have to interpret in relation to the question that I'm asking.
Okay. All right. So we are going to do bibliomancy to figure out how these challenges are going to go for you.
How they're going to manifest for you by the time we do the next episode.
So it's going to be dope. The book that we are using for this bibliomancy is Finnegan's Wake
by James Joyce.
So do you want to talk a little bit about this book? Because this book is actually really, really good for bibliomancy, and here's why.
Yeah, okay, so it was the last book that James Joyce had written. He wrote it over the last 10 years of his life. He incorporated as much knowledge as he possibly could in this. There have been instances of at least 10 different languages that have shown up within it. The entire thing is written like a dream sequence. So on the last page, the last sentence begins the sentence on the first page of the book.
So it starts in the middle of a sentence.
Yes.
Which the last sentence of the book is the beginning of that sentence.
Yes. And so it can be read as a cycle, and there are constant themes that will show up during it. It is meant to be read like a dream, and each person who reads it, because there's so much information packed within it, reads it differently than anyone else. So me, with all of the knowledge and all of the things that I have learned over my lifetime, will read it and understand the things written into it and mentioned and whatever, entirely different than Kilone or Dreadnought, because they have learned and experienced different things than I have. So it's absolutely perfect for this because...
It's also nonsensical.
Yeah, not only that, because it makes no fucking sense if you just read it. And it's been stated before that if you just read it out loud, if you just stand there and read it out loud, you will go under a consciousness altering.
So it will basically induce a trance state.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to do some bibliomancy from Finnegan's Wake about how your challenges are going to manifest. Are you ready?
Okay.
Rodios wadhalooing. Theirs is one lessonless message for good and true sirs. Will any person bereaved to be passant bringing back a rumpart to the hoved polity manster? Clontarf, one love, one fear. Elsers for the greeter glossary of code, calling from Funicu Lee, Funicu Law. So what I'm reading from that, especially with the mention of, let's see, greater glossary of code, and this is taking from your belief system, your understanding of things. You have one glossary of code. You are taking, there's one lessonless message for good and true sirs. You are taking this one thing, and you will subvert it. Calling from good Lee, or Funican Lay, Funican Law, you are taking the law and subverting it. Your law and doing so. So I see good things for you as far as that challenge goes.
Yay.
Here you go, Dreadnought. See what you got.
All right. Are you ready?
Does it matter?
Yes, it does. I'm not going to read before you're ready.
Okay, hit me.
I reverse you, how, my seer? Be drinking that. Quite truth.
Yeah, it's hard to read.
Yeah. Quite truth. Gradius. I am Yush. See what I'm hearing? Also goods, please it. Me as I'm sure. Be filling this. Kiso, you said it. Apas fellow. Muchas gracias is firing on me.
Okay.
What do you got?
That's a whole lot of shit. So what I get is I revere you, how my seer, and you see what I'm hearing. Basically, you're going to realize how these two extremes are connected. Not necessarily that you will see like, oh, I am definitely on this side. I'm definitely right hand. I'm definitely left hand. You might not even be able to figure out like, I lean more right hand. I lean more left hand. But you're going to figure out like, these two concepts are not different. These two concepts are something that we exist in like a fluid state between them at any given point. And you're going to kind of figure out from Kiso, you said it, right? Which is basically like, you already know this, and you're going to like, through mapping all of this shit out, you're going to really realize it. Because like, just from, us discussing and talking about it, like you can know something on a philosophical level. But by practice, you understand.
Well, yeah, and that makes sense with the reading that I had done at the very end of it, how it had said, like, Funican Lay, Funican Law. You have these two different sides, and you're balancing between the two of them.
Yeah. So I think that it'll be a thing where you might not... it might be a thing that just kind of grows a little bit out of the scope of what you had initially set out to do, but it's going to be a good thing. Like, you're going to gain understanding from it, but it'll probably, just from the fact that I suck at reading, like, it's gonna be a challenge, because there's that had a lot of nonsense words in it. There's going to be stuff in there.
The entire book is nonsense.
No, but I mean, like, there's certain stuff in
right,
here
yeah.
where like, but this one specifically, this passage has like literal nonsense words that are, he's taking words from different languages and he's making disambiguations into English sounding stuff. So it's going to be a challenge to like kind of codify and put these things and parse the information. But it's going to be a good practice, and you're going to learn a lot about how you view magic from it.
All right, your turn.
Yay. Okay. My cities and Taka tell Tibbs has Eve, and what thou revealest life proving I the death of Ronalds's, when wind power wine has bucked the kick on poor one man. Biliousness has been biliousness during millenniums of millenniums, and our mixed racings have been giving 2 hoots or 3 jeers for the grape, vine, and brew. And Peters in New Amsterdam and Palios, where the polos go, and rum smelt his end for him. And he dined off South American. Okay.
There's something in there about Donald Rumsfeld.
I mean, I see, like, revelous life proving the death of Ronald says. Like, I feel, I'm just getting, like, an emotional response from that of, like, proving that anything can die in life, and that because I know Ron McDonald didn't exist then, but I hear Ronald says that's something that's clownish or silly that actually, like...
But it's still like this giant fucking thing.
Yeah.
It made me think of Ronald Reagan.
Of course it did.
Which also, like, it elicits an emotional response, but not the same one that people get from Ronald McDonald, except for that they're both fucking clowns.
Yeah.
There
yeah,
you
and
go.
essentially, the imagery of the death of a clown figure. Yeah, when poor wine has bucked the kick on poor one man.
Maybe it's just because I've been listening to a lot of battle rap, but buck the kick makes me think of shooting a gun.
Yeah. Could be.
Yeah. I mean, it says when wind power wine, so, like, it could be, like, libations has killed, and kicked this thing down.
Maybe you need to get really drunk and kick the thing that you're
2 liters of wine.
There we
2
go.
liters of wine.
2 liters of wine, and I'll be able to kill the thing.
Bucks
Big
of
old
wine
clown.
puts me right out.
Just sit there with 2 liters of wine, get really sad, and kick the thing you care about.
Boom. Nailed it. Well, right on. So that's an example of bibliomancy. Another thing that works really well for that is if you look, I had posted something again on the Discord, but if you look up cut-up technique.
Which you talked about in the last episode.
Yeah, that works really well. You can also use, it doesn't have to be books. You could use, like, a newspaper.
Right.
You could use...
Yeah, like I said, like a written form of media, magazines.
Yeah. One that we've actually used quite a bit over, like, in the last few months is Inspirobot.
Yeah.
Oh.
Inspirobot is amazing.
It told me that I have the potential to become a cockmaster.
It told me that every weak human must try. Also you.
It also... I was also told... the path to find true happiness is to titty fuck the untitty fuckable.
I was told to
That's
remain
quite a goal.
smelly.
Yeah, remain smelly. That's true.
So that's why I
Keep
haven't
doing that.
bathed in a week.
I can tell. That's why you're on the other side of the room.
Goddamn right. All right, so that
But for future ones, like when it involves like images and shit like that, like
we'll post them on our Instagram account. We'll post them on the Discord, Facebook group, all of that stuff. We'll also, if you have a suggestion for something you want us to try, we can absolutely take that into account. Eventually, it's going to devolve into us just pulling shit up from the wiki article about divination and just trying it to the best of our ability.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's going to be a thing that we're doing from here moving forward. I'm really excited about it.
Mm-hmm.
But for now, I think that's going to pretty much wrap us for this episode.
Yep.
On right-hand path versus left-hand path ideology, philosophy, technique. Any closing thoughts?
No, I'm pretty much good.
Nope.
All right. Well, then the only thing left is a quick hail skafuckle.
Hail
Hail
skafuckle.
skafuckle.
And we will see you all very soon. We love you very much. Peace.
Later.
Be seeing ya.
This has been a production of the Faith Blind Council. Please consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/faithblindcouncil. We would also like to thank our sponsors. You can support us by supporting them. You can also contact us on Twitter at FBC Podcast, the number 1,
on Instagram at FBC Podcast, and via email at faithblindpod@gmail.com.